The next topic we'd like to cover is local traffic on the bypass. Going back to Caltrans' projection of 721 vehicles per hour projected out 20 years to the year 2028, the next question is, how do we get from 721 vehicles per hour of interregional traffic to 1,350 vehicles per hour that was used in the environmental impact statement? And the answer is local traffic. Caltrans nearly doubled the amount of traffic on the bypass by assuming lots of locals would use the bypass to get from one end of town to the other, or to use other routes. The letter we received from Caltrans explaining this model included a schematic diagram as shown on the top and a chart shown on the bottom about where traffic was coming and going and how much they contributed to the total traffic on the bypass. The letter we received was only for a 4-lane version of alternative C1T, not the modified J alternative that's being constructed right now. The difference is that the northern interchange for the alternative C1T was an additional half-mile north of the Quail Meadows interchange, which is being constructed now. And as Caltrans explained in the letter, this means that fewer amount of local traffic would opt to use the bypass in alternative C1T than they would for modified J. And that means all the numbers that they generated in the bottom half of this slide are going to be much higher for the J alternative, which is being constructed now. Also, the letter we received only included an analysis for the northbound lane, not the southbound lane, although we could probably assume that the numbers would be similar. In the letter, Caltrans explained that this was a time savings model. In other words, if a traveler had the option of going through town or taking the bypass, they would opt for the version, or they would opt for the route that would save them the most time, even though it might be a longer distance. While this may or may not be true, we think this is actually a reasonable and objective assumption, and we've used the same assumption in our analysis. To make that chart on the bottom right-hand corner a little bit easier to read, we blew it up and rearranged it a little bit. The numbers are exactly the same. The messed up.
The what?
The format's messed up. Can you fix that? Can you fix that in the thing later?
Yeah.
Okay. To make the chart on the bottom right-hand corner a little bit easier to see, we blew it up and rearranged it to make it a little more easy to understand. This chart shows the left-hand column is where traffic is originating from, either A or E1. The middle column is where the traffic is going to, and the right-hand column is the vehicles per hour generated by each one of those origin-destination combinations. So if you look at the top schematic, the two blue dots show point A and point B, which are then indicated in the table below. So traffic originating south of Willits at point A and destined for points north of Willits, point B, this would be the true interregional traffic, Caltrans said would be 383 vehicles per hour. Again, that's projected out to the year 2028 and for alternative C1T, not the modified J. For traffic originating south of town, point A, and headed to Brook Trails, point D, Caltrans estimated that would amount to 87 vehicles per hour. For traffic originating south of town and destined for somewhere presumably south of Sherwood Road, let's say Commercial Street, that would be 75 vehicles per hour generated by that origin-destination combination. Caltrans also assumed, or calculated from their model, that a number of trips would be generated from people located in the south end of Willits. For example, people in the south end of Willits, point E1, headed towards points north of Willits, would generate 48 vehicles per hour. From a point south of Willits to Brook Trails would be 27 vehicles per hour, and from south of Willits, the south end of Willits to, let's say, Commercial Street would be 30 vehicles per hour, for a total traffic of 650 vehicles per hour in the northbound lane projected out to year 2028 for alternative C1T. You look at the schematic, these numbers don't perhaps look that unreasonable. However, if you plot these points out on a real live map of Willits, you can quickly see that the origin destinations that Caltrans studied make no sense at all. For example, point E1, which is what Caltrans said was the south end of Willits, is actually shown here at the Evergreen Village Shopping Center. We use this because the Evergreen Village Shopping Center is the southernmost point in Willits that would generate any significant levels of traffic at all. So Caltrans analysis is suggesting that someone shopping at the Evergreen Village Shopping Center and returning to Brook Trails would opt to drive 2 miles south to the south interchange of the bypass, get on the bypass, drive 4.5 miles north on the bypass, get off on the old Main Street, and drive an additional mile south to get on Sherwood Road and go home to Brook Trails. This would require 7.5 miles of driving instead of just turning right out of the Evergreen Village Shopping Center, traveling about 2 miles through town to get to Sherwood Road. No one in their right mind would choose this, and yet Caltrans's model showed that a significant number of people would opt for this origin or opt to use the bypass rather than to go through town. To quantify this, we actually did our own traffic study. We use highway capacity manual calculations for average travel speed on the segments between the traffic lights and the interchanges, and we used highway capacity manual calculations to calculate average intersection delay. We then had a team of people who took times of going through Willits to field validate and calibrate the model we developed. This was done over a period of about 10 days, and most of our data was between 2 o'clock p.m. and 7 o'clock p.m., which covered the peak hours. Our model shows very different results than Caltrans's modeling. The delta time column shows the difference in time between a driver opting to go on the bypass versus a driver opting to go through town. A negative indicates it would be faster to use the bypass. A positive indicates it would be slower to use the bypass. So for example, from point A to point B, this is the true interregional traffic. Using the bypass instead of going through town would save about 4 minutes and 1 second to the average traveler. We agree that interregional traffic would in fact use the bypass, and we projected that this would generate 298 vehicles per hour in the northbound lane. From people going from south of Willits to Brook Trails, this would be Brook Trails commuters returning home in the evening, we calculated that using the bypass would save roughly 16 seconds. While this is not a significant time savings, we feel that just psychologically most Brook Trails residents would opt for this if the option existed. And we think that 142 vehicles per hour would be generated from Brook Trails commuters rather than the 87 vehicles per hour that Caltrans was using. However, for all other options that we studied, that includes from south of Willits to, let's say, Commercial Street, it would take a minute longer using the bypass, and using a time savings model, the same methodology Caltrans used, we do not think that any significant numbers of local residents would opt for this. Same thing goes for traffic generated towards the south of Willits, which again we assume to be the Evergreen Village Shopping Center. From point E1 to B, for example, would take a minute and 39 seconds longer. From E1 to D, this would be from the Evergreen Village Shopping Center to Brook Trails, it would take 4 minutes and 20 seconds longer to use the bypass than it would to go through town. And from E1, the Evergreen Village Shopping Center to, let's say, Commercial Street, it would take 6 minutes and 7 seconds longer to use the bypass than to go through town. We do not understand how Caltrans modeling could have concluded that drivers faced with these origin destinations would opt to use the bypass because it would save time. This raises serious questions about the accuracy and the validation of Caltrans' model. Our conclusion is that a reasonable projection of traffic on the highway, on the bypass, would be 440 vehicles per hour in the northbound lane, based mainly on regional traffic, interregional traffic, and Brook Trails commuters. In summary, we believe that a reasonable estimate of total traffic on the bypass, projected out 20 years, would be somewhere between 750 and 800 vehicles per hour, not 1,350 vehicles per hour that Caltrans projected. Okay.